Hi, this is Trisha Schmalhofer with BAM, Badasses, Alchemists, and Mystics. And I am here with the lovely, wonderful, peaceful, just serene. Your energy's serene, Natalie. Natalie Cook. Hi, Natalie.
Hi, so lovely to have you be here with you. Thanks so much for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you on. And tell everyone where you are. Where do you live?
Right, so I live in Auckland in New Zealand, so the other side of the world from you, and it's just so amazing that we have this technology that supports being able to meet in the first place, be in the same book, and sit here having a conversation at 8 a.m. on Thursday the 17th, my time,
And it's
2 p.m.
2 p.m.
Wednesday the 16th, your time. Yeah, or even on different days.
That's pretty amazing, though. That's pretty
Yeah.
amazing. So, yeah, there's, we were just talking about before we went live how what's happening in 2020 has not only have we've had to isolate in some ways, but through technology, I've expanded my communications and connections to people all over the world via classes
Mhm.
and work, so it's an amazing thing that we can be doing this.
Absolutely. I even realized the other day when I went to a local networking business, women's business group that I've just joined and realized, as I was sitting there trying to imagine who I could, share their businesses with, realizing that my network has now expanded so far that it's more international than it is local. I'm like, yeah, I know people who need an insurance person, but they live in Canada or America. So it's interesting how there's been an expansion and a contraction all at the same time. It's been quite a year of paradox, really, if I think about it.
It has. Let's
Mm.
let's talk about that a little bit. The
Mm.
expansion and contraction and the paradox and even the different emotions that I've been experiencing that are
Mhm.
on polar opposites of the emotional scale at the same
Mhm.
time. Like
Mhm.
deep
Yeah.
sadness and loss with elation and joy and expansion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been, and I think it's something that I often experience when I visit my home country. I'm from South Africa originally, and my parents live in South Africa, and my younger sister still lives there, and my older sister's in Denver in Colorado. So I have definitely experienced quite an extreme range of emotions myself this year. Really, moments of deep grief, my own, and tapping into the collective around, like, not being able to see my family, the tension of that, and when will I see them again? And sometimes I've even tapped into, will I see them again? When you've got this disease and illness that's spreading around the world, and then also connecting with them even more, particularly my parents. I've gotten into a better habit of being in touch with them every week, at least more so this year than I did before, because our lives have slowed down. So in many ways, I'm more connected while being disconnected. And then, like I think many experienced in those first lockdowns, um, the joy of space, if we were lucky enough to not have the massive burden of finances immediately. Like, I think I really want to, and I know that I did that in the book that we shared together. It was really point to my privilege. Like, I can hold space for all these emotions. I can go in these two different directions. I can find the flexibility and the resilience because I really have my core needs met. And I think that makes a huge difference in my nervous system, and knowing that in the back of my mind, I'm fine. I'm okay. I'm looked after.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I resonate with everything you're saying, and with my dad who's still alive. My mom passed, and I shared
Yeah.
about that in the book. But
Yeah.
it's like my dad's having some health issues, not COVID related, but
Mm.
he's starting to isolate more, and so where I would see him and my family every Christmas like clockwork, I'm not going to see him this year. But
Yeah.
like you, I've made a point, because I don't know when I'm going to get to see him again. I make sure I keep that connection alive with phone calls, and
Mm.
he doesn't do Zoom and all that, so it's phone, and that's what works for him,
Mm.
Nav-
Yeah.
so navigating the clickety clack, how to live a
Yeah.
fulfilled life in a seemingly toxic world. It's the book that we're both in.
Yeah.
And you just mentioned your nervous system,
Mm-hmm.
right? And in
I did.
your chapter, you talk a lot about your nervous system, and uh, your story of, I looked at your website, I looked at your read your chapter, and what jumped out, two things. One is behind me, radical kindness,
Mm-hmm.
mentioned in your chapter. And you
Mm-hmm.
talk a lot about compassion for yourself as you're going through a clickety
Mm-hmm.
clack. And I just love that term, radical kindness, because those two words don't go together enough, I don't
No. Yeah.
think. Right?
No.
So that and find calm and thrive is what is on your homepage of your website. And that
Yeah.
calm and thrive, again, it's kind of like two words I wouldn't normally put together.
Yeah.
So can you explain a little bit or go into the radical kindness, that
Yeah.
feeling?
Radical kindness is just really taking a stand for, if we're talking about radical kindness for ourselves, which is what I really talk about a lot, because actually that's where it starts. And I think there's so many traditions and the essence of many religions even that starts with this idea of, we need to start with ourselves and the way we treat ourselves and the people around us, and that's really what I spend a lot of time working with mums, especially because they spend a lot of time giving. So I talk a lot about radical kindness towards self, and I really like the word radical kindness, and I'm definitely not the first to put the two together. I think it's emerging a lot more at the moment. I've been reading a few more books on stress lately, and people are starting to really marry those two words together a lot more than they used to. And it's taking a stand when it's maybe not the thing to do. It's not the thing people would expect you to do because it's not in alignment with what the expectations of, for like my clients, for mothers, is to actually put themselves first in some moments and actually decide, well, no, we're not going to go and do that thing today as a family because I can't do that. Because in this moment, the most important thing for me to do for me so that I can show up for you is something different, something that perhaps is going to result in a little bit of resistance from the people around you.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah. And it's really radical in the sense that you actually, it really needs to be kindness, very conscious level of kindness to yourself. You have to really like even in the amount of time you spend considering being kind to yourself needs to be radical,
Yeah.
especially right now, because we talk, you brought up the nervous system, and I talk about it a lot, and I know we share an understanding of the nervous system and how it affects our lives. But right now, the way the world is everything that's happening is almost the opposite of what allows us to feel calm. The level of uncertainty, the level of disconnect and isolation from touch and being in people's physical presence, because I think a lot of people, I don't think anyone actually underestimates it. I think we all miss it, but perhaps many people don't understand how important physical presence and touch and sharing that is for our nervous systems.
Even introverts in the beginning
Yes.
of the pandemic were like, oh good, I get to spend time together, but now they're like, oh my gosh, like I'm feeling it, I'm feeling that
Mm.
physical presence connection. Keep going. Keep going.
So that's where we need to be radically kind. We need to really cut ourselves some slack. And that's not an excuse for poor behavior, but it's just know better, do better, but like cut yourself some slack and give to yourself. And interestingly, it's not about hot baths and spa days and
Yeah.
necessarily massages and body work. Radical kindness can be it can actually be choosing to, for like mums, spend time with your kids where you're not doing anything specific, where you're not, I don't know, cleaning or
It's,
cooking or
yeah.
making everything perfect, or even making the time together perfect. It's just being present is being kind to yourself. It's just a shift. It's a shift in awareness.
Yeah. I mean, when you just said that, Natalie, I even pictured just unscheduled snuggle time on the floor with a bunch of blankets. Like, you know what?
Yeah.
Mom needs to rest. Come rest with me. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Exactly. And that's okay. And deciding that your kid doesn't need to do 500 extramural activities because you can't handle it, because you not being able to handle it is actually an important piece of the puzzle. It's
Yeah.
not sacrificing yourself 100%. There's a balance.
There is a balance. And, especially for mothers, which is that's mainly who you work with. And I know you
Mm,
work with other people. We were talking about
mm,
that a little bit too, that it's not just moms you work with, but moms really need it because of the giving nature of motherhood
mhm,
and
mhm,
being the matriarch, the center of everybody's world pretty much, right?
mhm, mhm. Yeah.
But even someone like me that doesn't have children, but I'm a giving person.
Yes.
And I
Yes.
say I've had to look at, even with this year, people that have been kind of downplaying and isolating, especially manual therapists, because for a while a
Mm,
lot of people didn't work. But I find that I actually got busier this year because I chose to adapt and work on expanding in other interests and other things I'm good at.
mhm,
I had to really look at saying no, the radical kindness of
mhm,
looking inside and saying, am I overextending myself? Do I
mhm,
feel like I have to be there for people that are really struggling right now, spiritually, emotionally, physically, even when I might be going through my own personal stuff? So,
mhm.
what you're saying, I think, applies to everyone, especially people that are giving in nature, you know.
It's so interesting you say that, because a lot of my realizations that I came to, and some of the processes and practices that I share with other mums actually came through my experience of being a therapist first, pre-kids, and burning out in that space, and of giving, and always seeing a need to give and extending myself. And
That's me.
yeah, yeah. And so I I had to really step back and be radically kind to myself, set some boundaries, and even create some practices for how to kind of do that in the moment in my body without like actually being able to create that without anyone even know it's happening. It's almost like on an energetic level. And when I learned how to do that, I started to feel like I was thriving. And it's that find calm and thrive. And when I talk about finding calm, it's just a settled nervous system, because when we're in that state of parasympathetic, rest and digest, that
Yeah,
is when our body thrives. Physically, we thrive, mentally and emotionally, because we can think better, we can relate better in that space, and so we thrive. So that's where the find calm and thrive
yeah,
comes from. Yeah.
yes. And the finding
Yeah.
the calm, I think, is it's a journey to
Mm-hmm.
be able to access that calm, even in a moment's notice of just a lot of us in the book talked about breathing in one way or another, of just, that usually a nice deep belly breath that engages that parasympathetic nervous
Mm-hmm.
system. Yeah, and just takes you there. But some people, it's a journey of finding other ways to do that. And
Yeah.
some of the things you mentioned in your book, in your chapter in the book, is well, we talked about body work a little bit, and both of us are craniosacral therapists.
Yeah.
Somato-emotional release work is, excellent work to get in that tissue and release those blocks. You mentioned meditation, which is lovely. There's a couple that I really, besides radical kindness, the reach out and receive help. That's really hard for a lot of people to do.
That's the hardest one. That's the one that's still a work in progress for me. And it's the one that I even recently had a real, I think that realization came the most recently to me. I think I'd always known about it, but it was about a year and 4 months ago, just over a year ago, I developed overnight inflammatory arthritis, and I couldn't walk, and it just got worse, and then ended up in my spine and both my feet and my fingers. So you can imagine what that did to my world as a body worker. And I was stuck at home on the lazy boy. I couldn't even stand for long enough to cook a meal. I had to hire someone to help pre-cook meals for the family. If I took enough Voltaren, which was totally not something I ever would have done in the past, you know what it's like being a cranial therapist. We tend to go au natural. Not all of us, but many of us. And I could make it to pick my kids up from school. So my priority was I can walk my kids into the class and get back to the car and, have a little cry in pain.
Yeah.
I was on crutches. I actually couldn't do it by myself anymore. And the realization that for many years, doing it alone was like almost a badge of honor for me was so huge. It was like, I can do this. I can do this by myself. I'm independent. And our society
And I'm
really, really
strong.
feeds this independence. I mean, you see it in school. The kids must be independent, and
True.
we're not independent as a society. Look at us now. We're entirely interdependent. We rely on other people's choices and how they show up for us. And I realized I had so much help around me that I just often said, no, don't worry about it. I can do it. And now I was like, can I make you a meal? I'm like, yes, please. That would be fantastic. Can I pick the kids up? Yes, please. That would be fantastic. And it was so hard for me because I just wanted to be the one saying, I'll pick your kids up from school. And would you like me to make you a meal? And here I was on the receiving end. And that was my lesson. I think that was my big lesson in that experience, is actually let people help. Even my sister-in-law, bless her, was visiting from down on the South Island, and she was staying with us on their camper van outside our property for a month. And when she was here, she hadn't realized how bad I was, because of course I didn't make a
You
big
don't tell
deal about it.
that.
And
I can
she's
manage.
like, yeah, I can manage. I'm fine. And I was like, I'm not fine. And she cooked and she cleaned and she just took over for that whole month, and I could rest. And she cooked beautiful meals that were healthy so that I could actually start to eat properly, because I couldn't even stand long enough to bother preparing a meal. So yeah, receiving help
Wow.
was the hardest one for me. And I had to put it in there because I think it's probably the most important one for many women, especially. I think we tend to be givers.
Yeah. I know that's always been a hard one for me. And even now I'm in a relationship and my partner's always asking what can be done. And I have to resist saying, "Oh no, I'm okay," and just think about, go into that calm space and say, what is it that I need help with right now that's going to help me get into a calm space? So, um, so allowing other people to opening up to receiving help, as uncomfortable as that is,
Yeah.
reaps so much reward. Because my experience with energy is it opens up an energetic flow and
Yeah.
really allows me to love even deeper and feel like support, you know,
Mm-hmm.
in that root chakra and that
Yeah.
first two chakras. It's like, you know what? People actually care and I'm
Mm-hmm.
okay. And it's community.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, it's a big piece.
Yes. I agree. I think even with things shutting down, a lot of my clients, their churches shut down for
Mm.
a while. And so even having not only that disconnect from family and neighbors, but it's a church community that might have been a foundation for them, or a spiritual community if you went to an
Mm-hmm.
ashram or a temple or a
Mm-hmm.
meditation group, right?
Mm.
It was for me, I know it was the case with my spiritual community. It kind of got cut off, so I
Yeah.
had that opportunity to go in and form something even deeper, a deeper connection from within. Yeah.
Mm.
So
Yeah. So many layers.
so
So
many
many layers.
layers. Another component that I think kind of goes with this, Natalie, is this idea of surrender that you
Yeah.
talk about.
Yeah.
And being kind to yourself. That it's Can you elaborate a little more about the idea of surrendering into?
Yeah. I think if I think back to that experience last year, it was when I finally quit the extra job I didn't need to be doing and sat down and allowed myself to feel all the stuff that was there and to be the exhausted that I was. To actually stop and realize, and it wasn't just because I had inflammatory arthritis. There were a lot of factors that led to that, but one of them would be that I'd been ignoring the whispers that had been there for some time
Mm,
around overextending myself and feeling exhausted and not stopping long enough to just feel what was there. That's what surrender is to me. It's stopping long enough to just feel what's actually there and let it be there. And it's when you haven't stopped for a long time. I know for me, when I hadn't stopped for a long time, it wasn't that comfortable a place to be in.
mm-hmm,
It was uncomfortable. And
mm-hmm,
when I allowed myself to hold that um, discomfort of being where I was,
mm-hmm.
what rose up was the clarity of what needed to be done. And that wasn't easy either. I had to let go of some things.
Yes.
And once I'd let go, it was easy, but letting go is not always easy to do.
Oh,
And then what was wonderful, what emerged out of that is I could let in other things.
mm-hmm.
And that really, like, we talked a little bit about how we sort of have a little bit of a common thread with that course that we both did with Sharon.
Yeah, Sharon Desjardins.
Chalet, yeah, shout out Sharon. um, it was when I was finally able to step into who am I here to help. It was like this final piece of my own journey that allowed me to claim my own zone of I don't want to say genius because that's not the right word, but it's just who I'm here to serve, really.
Right.
It because it no longer needed to worry about trying to be there for everyone because I've just realized I can't do that.
We can't
You
be there
know?
for everyone. Yeah. And trust that we will be there for the people that we need to be there for.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll be there for us when we need it.
Yeah.
Something you said, I almost called you Sharon, Natalie. Well, with Sharon's course, the hero's journey was what she called it in the course that I
Mm,
took with her, and I know we took it in different times.
mm,
Um, that I feel like we all are on our journey, but even
mm,
heroes have to stop and sit and rest, and
mm,
that surrender piece, what something you just said, which kind of mirrors the craniosacral world,
mm,
of to just kind of allow to be in that, the feeling of tension, right?
mm,
Or in the feeling, the yucky feelings that
mhm,
it's like that we're trying to avoid by staying busy, right?
mhm,
And then the piece that you just said about allowing it to release, which is true with craniosacral as well, letting the tissue or the membrane release. And then
mm,
comes the inflow of energy. There comes
mhm,
the inflow of fluid or of,
mhm.
of
Yeah. Yeah, and I love how you saw that parallel, and I know that when this pandemic hit, I'd actually not been working for a few months already. I'd actually was just starting to feel a lot better and was ready to get back into work again. And then we were
yeah,
like, no, we're not working, which was
sure.
fine because
Mhm.
I realized that a lot of what we've learned in craniosacral therapy and what I find most valuable to me personally is those skills of being able to meet our clients, but I turned it on myself, meet myself where I'm at,
Yes.
listen, listen, follow, hold space for, and let and allow. And I realized, wow, what I've got out of craniosacral therapy isn't necessarily what I get when I'm on the table. It's these principles that you learn as a therapist.
Yes.
And I realized I want to teach people how to do that for themselves.
Right.
Um, so that they're not, the body works beautiful, and it's never going to replace touch.
And sometimes we need that in our journey. Sometimes we do.
Yeah. But to have an ability to meet yourself where you're at and to allow for what's there and to nurture yourself
Mhm.
is, to me, priceless. It has been priceless to me, and it was what I realized got me through this whole experience to the other side, where I'm walking the dog,
Mhm.
running around with my kids, and I'm to all intents and purposes mostly healed through that. And it was these processes that allowed me to do that. And yeah.
Yes. And in your book, your clickety clack moment was when you were age 3,
Mm,
and you talked about how through your life, the tools that you developed. But in this interview, we're talking about the more recent clickety clack,
hmm.
right?
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
and so with the inflammatory arthritis, that what you
Mm.
called it, inflammatory arthritis?
Best way to describe it.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
So you had an opportunity. So is that how you came out of that? Do you mind sharing a little more about that personal
So
journey?
and I think what I probably missed in the book, kind of trying to keep it really brief, was how these moments are all connected with each other.
Yes.
Like this most recent clickety clack, this experience and that opening up to receive was probably the biggest lesson in that for me, being allowing people in was, and my inability to do that, or my resistance to doing that, was very much informed by having lost my mum at such a young age, and I guess the mechanism of protection that I developed was, I can do this on my own.
Mhm.
I wasn't on my own, just so we had plenty of support, but I guess the little 3-year-old in me felt like, well, got stuck, and I need to like do this on my own now. I need to, or I don't want to let too much in because it might just go like it. That's what my nervous system learned at such a young age,
Yes.
that all that love is great, but it disappears really quickly too. And so I developed this protection, this wall. And I think this most recent clickety clack was this final kind of just, I've done a lot of cranial, the advanced process to going in advanced training. So
Mhm.
you'll know what kind of work I've done up until this point. But this experience was like this necessary breaking down of that barrier.
Mhm.
And so that was a big part of what got me through, because when I did that, I was able to access all the support that was there and I knew was there from my knowledge. So how to eat, who to reach out for help, like how to not necessarily agree with the doctors and their prognosis
Oh,
and to not listen to what the doctors were telling me. I know that's terrible advice, and I'm by no means advising people not to listen to doctors, but I had a chronic, unexplainable experience. I wasn't in a life or death situation. It was, the bloods didn't show up anything specific. It was like guesswork as to what was going on.
yes.
And I know from my knowledge, when that's going on, you need to look a little wider because they don't really know. And that's okay, because
You're
there's a
not.
lot they do know,
Yes.
but they don't really know. And so the answer for me was to put me on methotrexate and prednisone and all these medications, because that's what you do for someone with rheumatoid arthritis, even though there was really nothing to point to that for me.
Right.
And so once I could let the support in, it came flooding. Well, I mean, I knew it was all there, but once I could actually let myself allow it in, the support from friends, from family, from, just generally my knowledge and knowing where to go for it. So it was food. A lot of it was actually eating better, which was where the radical kindness came in
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
Being caring enough for myself that I was going to give my body what it needed right now, and I wasn't going to eat because of emotions and stress. I was actually going to feed my body what it needed. I was going to make it my mission to remember to take my supplements, because I'd always said, oh, I can't be bothered. But no, I'm going to be bothered because my body needs this. It's hard for me. I really struggle with taking things.
Me too.
But I put a lot of effort, and I think in the first lockdown I was still in that space. This is great. I now have this space. All I'm going to do is cook nutritious food for myself,
Mhm.
take relaxing walks as far as I want to, not as far as I think I should. And because they're enjoyable, not because my heart rate needs to be taken up X amount of notches to get enough exercise. I'm going to listen to my body. And that's where the radical kindness piece really, really came in for me. And letting people help me. That's really how I got through it.
And it sounds like also just by allowing people to help you, it gave you opportunity to rest your body a little more.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
sometimes, yeah, like feeding it what you feel it's requiring to heal,
Mm-hmm.
and allowing others to help you, and then just allowing yourself to rest. Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah.
exactly.
I
Yeah.
thank you for sharing that. I think I needed to hear that about the supplements and the eating, because this year, honestly, the beginning before the any lockdowns happen, I made a commitment for my health this year, because
Mm-hmm.
I was starting to notice some lymphatic congestion, and I with energy levels, and my body was speaking out. And I
Mm-hmm.
listened before I got to the point where it was screaming at me, and signed on with a kinesiologist, chiropractor, nutritionist, lovely woman, and followed her program. And I've been doing it all through COVID, and there was lots of supplements, but I made a commitment, and I feel the best I've felt, maybe even ever. And I'm eating
Yeah.
the best that I've ever eaten, and dropped some weight that's been kind of hanging on, even though it wasn't coming off with all the old ways that I used to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So radical kindness.
Mm-hmm.
I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how can people, you can work with people that aren't in New Zealand? You had said you're,
Yes, yes, I do actually. My most recent, I do a group program. It's a 7-week program for mums, and we go through a few stages of this, covering a lot of what we've talked about today, but some specific mum stuff as well. Just really around connecting with the body and compassion and a compassion practice and what gets in the way of that. And we bring in some integration with some movement and then how to create change. So we move through, it's a very foundational course for creating. I call it Grow Your Calm. And I just ran it recently, and I had someone from England, two people from New York, and one from Vancouver, and a few from locally, so that the time zones get a little bit tricky, but I found one that seems to work for everyone. And so I have my Facebook page. It's actually, I've been trying to change the name of it for some time to Natalie Cook, but there are a few Natalie Cooks, and Facebook doesn't seem to be playing. But I've tried multiple variations of changing the name of my page, but Facebook's not playing. So I'm just accepting the universe wants me to keep it as my Thrive Beyond Pain, which is my clinic name in New Zealand. So it's Thrive Beyond Pain, and it's at Find, Calm and Thrive. I'm on there. I have a group for mums, if there are any mums who listen to this, called Mums Cultivating Calm.
Mm-hmm.
And you can email me at natalie@nataliecook.net. Yeah.
Okay, good. And then your website is
Oh,
nataliecook.net.
nataliecook.net.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's wonderful.
That's
So
right.
if you're a mom
I
that
am.
needs support, Natalie would be a lovely choice for all you moms out there. And that's moms of all ages and moms of.
I tend to see mostly mums with young kids because I think that's when people are really in the thick of it. But honestly, this is useful to be honest, like we've talked about, it's useful for anyone who gives a lot. So it almost feels like they're in the motherly role, but it is geared towards people with
Yes,
human children.
with human children.
There may be a new iteration of course for. I mean, that's why I've kept my website is nataliecook.net, because I do imagine in the future I may create courses for possibly even therapists or people who are in the giving roles.
I
That's
think
really what it's all
that
about.
sounds lovely. Please let me
Mm.
know when that happens. I'll be the first client. Natalie, it has been such a pleasure to talk to you.
Yeah, likewise. I've really enjoyed it.
Yes,
Yeah.
and nataliecook.net is the website, and Navigating the Clickety Clack is the name of the book. And Natalie has a chapter in here, and so do I, Trisha Schmalhofer. It really is a collection of wonderful people that really do live their talk. They walk the talk, and so perfectly. No, but we're doing the best. We're doing pretty darn good. So,
yeah.
All right. Well, that's it for today. And this was Bam, Badasses, Alchemist Mystics. And we'll see you next time on the podcast. Take care, everybody.